I would like to start saying that gender equality has to be taken as a principle. So that means that it is an umbrella that covers the development of gender norms. And it has taken an evolution. I mean, I'm going to focus on the United Nations because the United Nations is the site for norms in terms of creation of norms, implementation, and contestation of norms. And if we look at the United Nations, we see that since 1945, we find already in the UN Charter, a reference to equal rights for women and men. That's let's say, from the beginning of the organization, equality is there. But then in the 1970s, the issue of discrimination of women, mostly, enters into the UN agenda, and it gives place to one of the most important instruments of the UN in terms of discrimination against women. That is a convention that was approved in 1979, the CEDAW Convention, and this convention is one of the most important hard instruments, law instruments of the UN regarding women's human rights. Then, the context, such as it is now, the current context, is a context that was established in the 1990s in the liberal decade. A decade was human rights are very central, they are really central for the international order. And the other important thing, and maybe that's very important because contestation at present is really focusing on this aspect, is that gender is the formulation of gender equality. Women's rights give us this formulation where gender is a concept that goes beyond biological differentiation, the sex differentiation between women and men. And gender is a social construct that implies by itself power relations. It implies a certain social structure where there is hierarchy and where there is inequality between women and men. So the idea that we have this formulated gender equality means what? It means social transformation. It means that if we implement gender equality norms, we're going to transform the society. And how are we going to do it? We're going to do it especially through empowerment of women and also gender mainstreaming in all policies. In order to answer this question, I would like to start saying that we have to remember, that the EU is a community of values. The EU in the Treaty of the European Union, in Article 2, says that. First of all, at present, EU documents define gender equality as a fundamental right that is inspiring international and external policies of the Union. This is a process. The process starts with the Treaty of Rome in 1957. But in the case of the European Union, it's more precise because what the Treaty of Rome says is that the EU and the European community at that time will respect equality between women and men in the field of salaries. Equal pay. Equal pay between women and men is, let's say, the first issue on the agenda. Then in the 1970s, the process is a process of consolidating this idea of equal pay, and is transforming equal pay a principle through directives of the European Union and also the European Community at that time, and also through sentences of the Court of Justice. And the process being exactly the same means that in 1990s, the things that the European Union moves from this, let's say, equal rights area to more positive action. First of all, the Union is adopting the gender equality as a fundamental value. It's included in the Amsterdam Treaty. And then the Union is mainstreaming, gender mainstreaming all the policies, either the internal policies or the external policies. And in the case of the external policies, this is very clear in the case of development policy since the very beginning. The Union is producing gender action plans, and those gender action plans for the third countries, they have a priority of this gender action plan is especially promoting gender equality and empowering women. And one thing I would like to add here is that in this 1990s period, of course, the EU was advancing, was evolving, like the rest of the international context of like UN, as we said before. But there is another thing that I think is also quite important, is the internal changes. I'm referring now to the internal changes because I think that at present, they are very important too. Of the Union to 15. Sweden and Finland were joining together with Austria the Union. That was meaning that those countries were arriving with a very, let's say, quite powerful gender equality policies. And there was an uploading of those norms to the European Union. So this was quite important. And this process of uploading, so Europeanizing those, let's say, Nordic policies, then there was a downloading also. And this loading, in the case of Spain, is quite important because our country that had not at all, Spain that had not at all, experience in these fields, became, let's say, a good pupil, and now it's one of the leaders in this area, the area of gender equality. If we talk of advances of the gender equality, agenda in European Union policies, I think that we have to pay attention to an important step. That's the arrival of von der Leyen. The appointment of von der Leyen as to chair the Commission. Is it symbolic because it's the first time that there is a woman? For her, there was a key idea. There was the correlation between gender equality and high economic growth. And these, let's say, key ideas and this willingness, etc., took to the adoption by the Commission of a gender strategy for the period 2025. This gender strategy has like it's based on three main concepts. Gender pay gap, equality between women and men in political and economic decision making. And the third one is eliminating gender-based violence in the European Union. When this gender strategy was adopted, one of the main priorities of this strategy was that the EU ratify the accession of the organization to the Istanbul Convention. The Istanbul Convention is a convention adopted by the Council of Europe on preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence. I would start saying that just the example I gave, regarding the ratification of the Istanbul Convention by the European Union is a good example of the situation, how the situation is. The thing is that the gender equality norms are victims right now of political polarization processes, either at the global level, at the UN level, either at the European level, or at the domestic level. So we have a polarization in our case, talking about gender equality, a polarization between supporters of the existing gender norms as they have been defined by the UN, by the European Union, in hard law, in documents up to now. And then there is a second group of, let's say, social movements, states, etc., that they form what can be called an anti-gender movement. In United Nations, they usually are called the Unholy Alliance because the leader of the alliance is the Holy See. But there is a group of countries, a group of social movements. So what we have here is a kind of manifestation of a cleavage between two worldviews right now in politics. Let's say a worldview between cosmopolitanism versus communitarism, on open versus closed, or liberal versus illiberal. So that's the main challenge, if we want to say so. So we will go back to concretely to the anti-gender movement, as a challenge, and talking about arguments and actions taken at the UN or at the European Union level. Let's see the arguments. I would say that we have especially two big arguments, two key arguments. One of them is that this movement does not accept the gender framing. And then the second argument mostly is that the gender equality norms are not universal human rights because some women rights are not universally accepted. So based on this idea, the thing is that there is a big contestation, an important contestation, either on UN or the European Union, based also on two arguments or to what should be done. Taking into consideration this denial, denial of the universality of human rights, is that women rights norms should be renationalized. I mean, renationalization is one of the big arguments. So, women rights norms should be national norms, not international norms. And second one is the women's rights must be reframed into traditional, through a traditional values approach. They must have a redefinition. So the first idea is renationalization, the second idea is redefinition. What they mean by redefinition, I'm just going to give a couple of examples. For instance, for Russia, violence within the couple is not violence against women. And they have changed law in this sense, and they try to change, this position in the UN Council of Human Rights. Trump, for instance, was defending the idea that violence against women can be sometimes legal, but sometimes illegal. Sometimes legal. Why? Because, for instance, sexual harassment should not be considered violence against women. So this kind of movement of changes, and in the case of Orban, that I mentioned before, he's, contrasting women's rights with right to life, either with family as a basic unit of society or with Christian culture. This is not easy to answer. I would say maybe that the EU should be realistic and the EU should be strategic. First, realistic. First of all, the EU has to do a policy of containment, trying to protect the existing norms. That's not the time right now to promote hard law norms to advance in terms of gender equality. So it's better to keep what already exists, And I think that in this sense, the next European Parliament is going to be important because the European Parliament has been a norm entrepreneur, during the last 10, 15 years in terms of gender equality. So I think that the European Parliament is one of the institutions that we should really, follow if, the current composition is going to change or not that situation. And then the European Union should be also strategic. For that, the European countries, maybe not the EU, if not the 27, they can do it or they want to do it, but the European countries should try to build alliances in the UN and try to build alliances with some UN organs important, such as UN Women, for instance, or with others like-minded countries. So in being strategic means, trying to do this kind of alliances, I said, and of course, trying to differentiate between the kind of contestation we have in front of us. If the contestation is really a contestation in terms of validity of the norm, changing the definition of the validity of the norm, maybe at that moment, the EU should try to entrench, if you want to say so, in UN organs. But if the contestation regards, adaptation, regards application, etc., maybe the position would be much better to be just adapting to the situation than entrenching there. So choosing the wars that you want to fight, really, in this moment. So I would say these two ideas, to be realistic and to be strategic.